Hello, everyone, and welcome back to English for Migrants. I'm Emma, and today we have another inspiring episode for you. Learning English isn't always easy. Sometimes you feel confident, and sometimes you wonder if you'll ever become fluent. Many migrants give up because they believe they're not talented enough. But what if success isn't about talent? What if it's about persistence? Today's guest knows exactly what that feels like. Melissa moved from Colombia to the United Kingdom 4 years ago. Today, she's preparing for her IELTS exam and helping other migrants believe in themselves. Welcome to the podcast, Melissa.
Thank you so much, Emma. It's wonderful to be here. When I first arrived in the UK, I believed English was the biggest obstacle in my life. But after a while, I realized something surprising. English wasn't my biggest challenge. My biggest challenge was convincing myself not to give up.
That's interesting. Many learners think they need better grammar or a bigger vocabulary. But you're saying the real battle happens inside our minds. What made you realize that?
One evening, after another difficult day at work, I went home feeling exhausted. I had misunderstood my manager several times. During lunch, my colleagues were laughing together, but I couldn't follow the conversation. I smiled politely, but inside, I felt lonely. That night, I asked myself, maybe I'm too old to learn another language. I seriously thought about giving up.
I'm sure many people listening can relate to that feeling. So, what changed your mind?
I started reading about successful people. One story completely changed the way I looked at failure. It was the story of Thomas Edison. Everyone knows he invented the light bulb, but many people don't know how many times he failed before succeeding. He tested thousands of different materials. Some people laughed at him. Others believed he was wasting his time. But Edison never saw those attempts as failures. For him, every experiment was another step closer to finding the right solution. There's a famous quote often attributed to him, "I have not failed. I've just found thousands of ways that won't work." Whether those were his exact words or not, the message stayed with me. He refused to quit because he believed his goal was bigger than his temporary failures. He wanted to bring light to the world.
That's a powerful lesson. You said he refused to quit. Why did you use quit instead of stop? Native speakers use both, don't they?
That's a great question. Yes, both are correct, but quit often means giving up completely. For example, I quit my job. I quit smoking. I almost quit learning English. Stop, on the other hand, is often temporary. I stopped studying because I was tired. Maybe I'll continue later. So when we're talking about abandoning a dream, quit sounds stronger.
That's really useful. So how did Edison's story influence your own life?
I started thinking differently. Instead of saying, my English isn't good enough, I started saying, my English is improving every single day. Whenever I made a mistake, I reminded myself that Edison also made thousands of mistakes. The difference was that he kept moving forward. Little by little, my confidence started growing.
I noticed another expression. You said little by little. Why don't native speakers usually say slowly, slowly?
Because little by little is an expression. It emphasizes gradual progress. Native speakers use it all the time. For example, little by little, I became more confident. Little by little, my pronunciation improved. Of course, you can say slowly, but little by little sounds much more natural when talking about personal growth.
That's something many English learners don't know. Did your daily routine change after that?
Absolutely. I stopped waiting for motivation. Instead, I created habits. Every morning, I listened to an English podcast while preparing breakfast. During my commute, I repeated new vocabulary aloud. After work, I watched short videos without subtitles. Before going to bed, I read 1 or 2 pages of an English book. None of these habits lasted for hours. Most of them only took 15 or 20 minutes, but I repeated them every single day. That's when I understood something important. Consistency is more powerful than motivation.
I like that sentence. Consistency is more powerful than motivation. Can you explain what you mean?
Of course, motivation comes and goes. Some days you feel excited. Other days you don't feel like studying at all. If you only study when you're motivated, you'll probably quit. But if studying becomes part of your routine, You'll continue even when you don't feel inspired. That's exactly what Edison did. He didn't wake up every morning feeling excited. He simply continued working because he believed in his mission.
Another expression caught my attention. You said, I didn't feel like studying. Why not? I didn't feel to study.
Because after feel like, English uses a verb ending in ing. For example, I don't feel like cooking. I don't feel like working. I don't feel like going out. It's a very common structure in everyday English.
Excellent explanation. Did you notice any changes after several months?
Yes, at first the changes were small. I understood a few more words. Then I understood complete sentences. Eventually I could follow conversations at work. One day something happened that I'll never forget. A new employee joined our team. She was nervous because her English wasn't very good. She apologized every time she made a mistake. I smiled and told her, "Don't worry, every mistake is another lesson." As soon as I said those words, I realized I was repeating the same lesson Edison had taught me.
That's beautiful. Sometimes we don't realize how much we've grown until we're helping someone else.
Exactly. Growth is difficult to notice when you're living through it, but one day, you look back and realize you've come much farther than you imagined.
I heard another interesting expression. You said, you look back. Why do native speakers use look back so often?
Because look back doesn't only mean turning your head, it also means reflecting on your past. For example, when I look back, I realize how much I've learned. When she looks back, she feels proud. It's a very common expression when talking about life experiences.
I love that. Now, before we continue with today's topic, I'd like to move on to the second part of today's episode. Many of our listeners are preparing for the IELTS exam. And Melissa, I know your IELTS test is coming up soon as well. So let's imagine we're in a real IELTS speaking test. I'll ask you some common Part 1 questions and you can answer them naturally. Ready?
Absolutely, let's do it.
Wonderful. Let's begin. Melissa, I'd like to ask you a few questions about your childhood. What was your childhood like?
I had a happy childhood. I grew up in a small town where everyone knew each other. Life was simple, and I spent most of my time playing outside with my cousins and neighbors. We didn't have many expensive toys, but we used our imagination every day. Looking back, I think those experiences taught me to appreciate the little things in life.
That sounds lovely. Did you enjoy school when you were a child?
Yes, I did. My favorite subject was science because I was always curious about how things worked. I wasn't the best student in every subject, but I enjoyed learning. I also had a teacher who always encouraged me to keep trying, even when I made mistakes. I didn't realize it back then, but that advice has stayed with me throughout my life.
You just said back then. Why didn't you simply say at that time?
Both are correct. However, back then is much more common in everyday conversation. Native speakers often say, "Back then I didn't speak English. Back then I was very shy." It sounds much more natural than saying at that time in casual conversations.
Excellent. Now let's talk about friends. Do you have many close friends?
I don't have a huge circle of friends, but the friends I have are very close to me. As I've grown older, I've realized that quality is much more important than quantity. I prefer having a few people I can truly trust, instead of knowing hundreds of people.
Do you prefer spending time with friends or with your family? Why?
That's a difficult question because I enjoy both. If I need advice or emotional support, I usually spend time with my family. They know me better than anyone else. However, when I want to relax or have fun, I enjoy meeting my friends. I think having a balance between family and friends is important because they play different roles in our lives.
I noticed you said, I enjoy meeting my friends. Why not? I enjoy to meet my friends.
That's because enjoy is followed by a verb ending in ing. For example, I enjoy reading. I enjoy cooking. I enjoy learning English. Many English learners say, I enjoy to study, but native speakers don't. The correct structure is enjoy plus verb ing.
That's a very useful tip. Now let's talk about your daily routine. Are you an early bird or a night owl?
Without a doubt, I'm an early bird. I enjoy waking up before everyone else because the mornings are peaceful and quiet. I feel more productive during the first few hours of the day. In fact, I usually study English before going to work because my mind feels fresh.
What do you think are the biggest advantages of getting up early?
There are quite a few advantages. First of all, you have fewer distractions. Secondly, you can plan your day more carefully instead of rushing everywhere. Finally, completing an important task early in the morning gives you confidence for the rest of the day. That's one habit I learned after reading about successful people like Thomas Edison. Many successful people value discipline more than motivation.
Are there any disadvantages?
Yes, there are. If you don't sleep enough, waking up early can make you feel exhausted. Some people force themselves to wake up at 5 in the morning even though they went to bed very late. In my opinion, sleeping enough is more important than simply waking up early. A healthy routine should include both.
That's a very balanced answer. Now, I'd like to ask you something a little more personal. Have you ever wanted to give up learning English?
Yes, more than once. There were days when I couldn't understand native speakers. Sometimes people had to repeat themselves 2 or 3 times before I understood them. At first, I felt embarrassed. I even avoided speaking because I was afraid of making mistakes. But every time I remembered Thomas Edison, I changed my perspective. He didn't stop after one failed experiment. He simply tried another way. I told myself, if Edison could continue after thousands of unsuccessful experiments, surely I can continue after one difficult conversation. That idea completely changed my attitude. Now I see mistakes as teachers instead of enemies.
I love that sentence. Mistakes are teachers, not enemies. You also said, I was afraid of making mistakes. Why afraid of making instead of afraid to make?
Great question. Both are possible, but they have slightly different meanings. Afraid of making mistakes focuses on the fear itself. Afraid to make mistakes focuses more on the action you avoid. In everyday conversation, native speakers very often say, I'm afraid of speaking in public. I'm afraid of flying. I'm afraid of making mistakes.
That's another excellent explanation. Here's my last IELTS question. What advice would you give someone who is preparing for the IELTS exam?
I tell them not to chase perfection. Instead, focus on communicating clearly. Practice speaking every day, even if it's only for 10 minutes. Read something you enjoy instead of forcing yourself to study boring texts. Listen to English while you're cooking, walking, or driving. Most importantly, don't compare yourself with other learners. Everyone learns at a different pace. The only person you should compare yourself with is the person you were yesterday. Progress may seem slow, but little by little, you'll surprise yourself.
That's wonderful advice. Before we finish today's episode, I'd like to ask one final question. Many migrants around the world are listening to this podcast right now. Some of them feel lonely, some are struggling with English, others are thinking about giving up. What message would you like to leave them with?
To everyone listening, please don't give up. I know what it feels like to arrive in a new country and think, I don't belong here. I've felt lonely. I've made embarrassing mistakes. I've cried after difficult days. But every challenge made me stronger. Remember Thomas Edison. People only remember the light bulb. They rarely remember the thousands of attempts that came before it. Success is often invisible while you're building it. Every conversation you have, every new word you learn, every mistake you make, every time you try again, you're building a brighter future for yourself and your family. Maybe today you don't feel confident, maybe today English feels impossible, but if you keep learning, if you keep speaking, if you keep believing in yourself, one day you'll look back and realize that every small step mattered. Persistence changes lives, and I truly believe it can change yours too.
Melissa, thank you so much for sharing your story with us today. I think every migrant listening has learned something valuable, not only about English, but about life. Remember, learning a language isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up every day, making mistakes, and refusing to quit. Little by little, your confidence grows. Little by little, your English improves. And little by little, you become the person you once dreamed of becoming. Thank you for joining us for another episode of English for Migrants. If you enjoyed today's conversation, don't forget to keep practicing, keep believing, and most importantly, keep going. We'll see you in the next episode.
Thank you, Emma, and thank you to everyone who listened today. No matter where you come from or how difficult your journey has been, never stop believing in yourself. Your dream is worth the effort. Take care, everyone. See you next time.